Hello everyone, I'm Lydia Ruth. Welcome to Homemaking Radio, and I hope that you are doing well in your present circumstances, but that you have great plans for improvement. If you're listening to this on the channel, please click the link in the description box and go to the page where I have embedded it so that you can see all the things that I talk about and go with, maybe a summary or some pictures of the room that I'm in, or some other thing that I want you to see, maybe a list or some links. And so today I have a few things to talk about. I'm always very apprehensive, but I thought it'd be better to have something to listen to while you work, or maybe it will just help you sleep. And so we'll start out with the usual, you know the routine. Get yourself bathed and dressed, and automatically I think there's a motivation there that it creates, and that's why I emphasize dress. Of course, I'm a sewist and I like fabric and textiles, and I think that clothing changes the mood so much. As a matter of fact, I have been looking at textiles and clothing from Bhutan, which is a little pleasant little mountain country, and over near China and Tibet, and the royal family of Bhutan go to interact and visit with the royal families of all these other countries in the East, and the clothing of the king and queen of Bhutan is just beautiful. They have these big cuffs, and the cuffs match the collar of the clothing that they're wearing, but I wonder if it is a shirt underneath a jacket and the cuffs are just folded up over. I will put some pictures in the post. That's why I want you to go over there to listen to this. You can just be scrolling up and down while you listen. And I was looking at this and noticed that I have a catalog called Folkwear because I'm a sewist and I have way too much information on it. And I always think I'm going to miss out on something, so I'll get a catalog for patterns or something. And this catalog had a Nepal jacket that folded over just so over on the side and tied here, and I think it's similar to what they wear in Bhutan. So I would like to include that. And these people are so beautiful and so modest. In order to visit that country, you're not allowed to wear anything unbuttoned. You cannot wear shorts. You cannot wear anything immodest, and you can't wear hats indoors. Isn't that interesting? We used to have those rules here in the West, and so I wanted to read something today about the textiles of that region and the woven products. They even make things out of, I've noticed there's a lot more flax things made out of flax here in the U.S. now. I've been to Walmart, I've been to Marshall's, I've been to Ross and all these reject stores, discount stores, and there's all these beautiful flax things made out of 100% flax, beautiful, soft, beautiful blouses and sweaters and things like that. And so these are natural fibers in this country also, and so I want to read about those pretty soon, because I also have this book today called The Lost Art of Dress. And so in looking at these beautiful clothes of the royal family in Bhutan, and I'm so proud of them because they represent what they want others to be like, and that is the way we all should be. We're in a royal family, actually. When you become a Christian, you're added to the kingdom of Christ, and you are a royal priesthood, and we should act like a royalty. And so you can get a lot of looking at some of these things. And recently, one of the members, a princess of the royal family from Japan, went to visit a royal visit to Bhutan, and she had beautiful clothing on too. I mean, the cloth, the draping, that's what modest dress is supposed to be. It's Karistan, which means it's a Greek word for drape, and we're barely draped here in the West. So if you want to get good values regarding clothing and fabrics, go to the East. Look to the East, not to the West, for their designers, or design your own. And that's the fun of loving fabric and textiles, is that it all evokes a mood. But their textiles over in Bhutan, tell a story and a tradition, and they represent their history. There's so much to it. And so, okay, get dressed. We'll talk about the textiles later, and I'll read what I found about them. And make sure to make your list and pray over the list that God might have mercy on you to get your kitchen cleaned. Which reminds me of latest politics. It doesn't help, does it? It doesn't help you get everything cleaned up. And those of us who are vital, we've been through this kind of reporting and the scare and everything that goes on and the tragedy. As a matter of fact, those of us who were 13 years old when one of the presidents was assassinated have lived with that shock and that shame and the burden of that and the guilt of it for so long, and we've discovered that there are things that we are responsible for that we need to get done, and some of these reports are not helping us, are they? Not helping us in the destiny of our children and of our lives here at home with their character, and we'll discuss that too, I hope, today. Okay, so then after you get your list ready, let's get dressed. Get your face painted on if that's what you do. And I wanted to talk a little bit about skincare sometime when I come here, because I don't buy skincare products. I use almond oil, sweet almond oil mixed with a drop of frankincense essential oil and a drop of heliochrysum, just a drop of that, because I noticed that a lot of the ladies that do the makeup videos, they are really beautiful and everything, and the products that they use to prepare for their makeup is to make the makeup set, to make the makeup look good and not cake or run or anything like that to make it stick. But what do you do when you're not wearing makeup to make your skin look good other times? And so that's what I use. I'll put a picture of that on there. You have to be very careful with some of this stuff. You cannot put essential oils directly on your skin. You always have to have carrier oil, which is like almond oil, coconut oil, that sort of thing. But anyway, that's what I use. And so after you have prepared your appearance, now you're ready for the greatest job on this earth, which is your home, because you're the CEO, you're the manager. Scripture says that the younger women, the older women are to teach the younger women to be managers of their home, which keepers of the home, which means managers. And as I said before in my last broadcast, I have had classes on homemaking where I taught, homemaking and all the different aspects of it, and got wonderful reviews from my students here at the manse, and they could sew and they can prepare food and they know how to shop. They know the ins and outs of taking care of the house, but they never quite got the message of being keepers at home. There's your location. What's the occupation? Keepers or managers. Where is it? The location is at home. And they somehow never got that, because they thought that the scripture said, yeah, keepers at home, but that doesn't mean we can't go and do something else all day. But once you get started in being a keeper at home exclusively, you'll discover why you're needed at home. Now, I also had discussed before about men being providers, and we see that from Adam on and all through the scriptures about men being providers for their family. And provision is very important. Even if the economy goes down and the men lose their jobs or livelihood, if they have some kind of provision, that's what's important, that they have something that they can use to provide for their families. We had a situation here in our small town where there was a beautiful, beautiful industry that supported, they believed in hiring families. So if your father had worked there, they would be happy to hire the sons. Keep it in the family first, and you have better chance of getting a job there in this little industry. And it supported the whole town, and our churches were large. And so when we first came here, we had a good salary from them and in a good living, and there was a large attendance and everything. But when that industry quit for some reason, long story how it ended up, it quit. These people had to go find jobs elsewhere, and so we ended up in a smaller situation with no provision. So Mr. S had to figure out different ways. And I'm going to tell you, when you're raising your sons, teach them, if you're homeschooling, or even if you're not homeschooling. I think it's really important to teach them at home, because their minds will be clear and receptive to what you say if you are their teacher, rather than clouded and guided and going every which way. I think it's important to teach them how to sustain themselves and sustain their lives by good character and politeness and kindness and innovation and resourcefulness, so that they can sustain their lives in any crisis. For example, suddenly if everything crashes, have something, you can teach them to have something that they can do. And your capital, if you teach them, your capital is in your mind and in your hands. That's a capital that doesn't belong to anybody else. And you don't need to have tons of money to get it going. And also, if they will stay home, if your children will learn to stay home, instead of getting out there paying a high rent, trying to make it in life, if they could stay home. And that will help them get their nest egg going. And you know, these days parents can't afford to give their children inheritance. But if they have this inheritance of comfort and stability and location at home, that is worth a lot of money. When you think of how much rent is, you're giving your children quite a bit a month to sustain them and to help them in their future life by not having their earnings go out there to someone else. Now, so get yourself dressed and get yourself a list. Put your apron on, put your list in your pocket, make your list, pray that God will have mercy on you to get that list done. I'm great at making lists, and I love to check off stuff. But out of 100 things, I might get one thing done. And so what I have started doing is putting the small things on there, like get up. Make a cup of tea. And today, my tea cup looks like this, and it came from one of those stores. I think this was Home Goods. Most of these cups are under $6, $7, and so is the tea is even less expensive. And today I am trying Good Earth spiced cherry, and I like to try these different things because even if I don't want to drink it, they smell so nice in the house. So I wanted to show you what this looked like. And this was from one of our discount grocery stores. I don't know what you call them where you live, but they're kind of like a clearinghouse, and they bid on all this stuff and then offer it to the customers at a cheaper price. And I love these little silk bags. It has all these little bits of things in them. In fact, sometimes I take these kinds of tea bags and stick them in old musty drawers and closed up cabinets and places, inside of boxes and things where I want to keep it fresh looking. So I'll read what this is. It is cherry, blackberries, hibiscus, orange peel. And you're supposed to drink it hot, and I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I might make it and just, one thing when you're drinking tea, when I have people over, they want a tea, some kind of tea formality, I'll just say, okay, ladies, let's make the tea. And then, and I have started letting people just put hot water in their cup and then use whatever choice of tea bag they want. Those who want to make it in a pot, that's fine. But teapots, you have to wash them, and they take up more room. So I have gotten into collecting the cups instead of the teapots. And so I say, when this is full, before you sip it, you just run it under your nose. You get a good whiff of it. And it is the best way to get your taste accustomed to it and adjusted. So after you have had that, you've got your list, you're dressed, and you're almost ready to go. Can you go out in the blue light? If those of you who are vital are more likely to be up in the blue light, that is half hour before sunrise. And if you can go barefoot, our lawn doesn't have grass on it anymore. It's been taken over by yarrow and all kinds of herbs, and it's even got wild chamomile on it. And Mr. S mows it down with the tractor, and it looks like a real lawn. It's all green. So I get out there with bare feet and walk on it in the blue light once in a while, not all the time. And so if you can do that, do that. And then I think in order to get, like I said, to sustain yourself in a crisis, it's important to have certain things that you do, a ritual that you do every day, no matter what the crazy bad news is. And so that's why I say have some exercises. And there's some certain ones that I like to follow. And I won't do them all, but I might do one or two, and they're just basic. And if I were to have you in my school and you were my kids, I would have certain movements that we would do before we began. And we would start our little school with prayer and the reading of Scripture and maybe a little discussion of it. And then I would teach you to breathe through your nose. And there is a reason for this, is that it does have a way of reducing the effect of anxiety of the world. And I also think that the exercises help a lot. And just these little stretches and movements are so good for you. And it's important for the homemaker to have all this strength and to take care of yourself first, because you're the instrument, you're the person that is going to keep your family going, and probably a lot longer than you realize. You might think, oh, after my children are grown, I'm going to do this and do what I want. And then you find out that even after they're grown in their 40s and 50s, oh, do they ever need you, because the war is on them more than ever it was on us. There's a cultural war going on. And what's really sad is the culture moves away from the children's ideals and dreams. For example, let's say when they were little, they grew up wanting to be just like you. Grow up, get married, have a house, have children, enjoy life, and learn. And then something happens to their jobs, or there's a lot of intimidation or anxiety attacking them, and that's how they take people out, as with the anxiety and intimidation. And I was talking to one of my children about this idea of insecurity, and we were talking about how there's no insecurity if the one you're trying to please is the one that God put in your life to please. And if you're trying to please the Lord Jesus by your character, by developing the character that He has laid forth in here, and I'll read some of that today, I hope, then there's no need for insecurity. The world likes to make people feel they're not, they don't fit in, or they're insecure, or they're loners. That's the big thing now, is, oh, you're a loner. Like there's something wrong with that, you know. But we're going to talk a little bit about the peace of God. And so you need to look after yourself, and it's so important. What I like to do is, instead of having like a 10-minute exercise unit during the day, we're just going to go through the day and stop and do one exercise movement every now and then. It's the same with those of you who have these vitamin drinks that you like. Instead of sitting there and drinking it all, just sip on it throughout the day, and it seems to stabilize and maintain your strength. And that's the same thing with Scripture. Instead of sitting and having a long devotional, I'll pick a page here and then go back to it and read it throughout the day, and just kind of keep this going. And unfortunately, schools, public schools, which many of us who are vital grew up in, unfortunately, they divided everything into 45-minute hour subject matter and separated it all from everything else. Whereas in real life, We do many different things throughout the day and contact many subjects over and over again that blend in with other subjects. And so we don't, in homeschooling, I think it's really important not to separate subjects too much. One of the best things that I ever learned was how to use the first scripture of the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and how you can turn it into art and science and literature, and how you can use it for faith and for singing and music, and for learning about power, for learning about different kinds of power, you know, like the power of water and the power of wind, and the charge in the earth, and all the things that the earth can do for you, all the things you can use it for. And so we can, we don't have to have things in complete subjects that are separate from one another. That's hard to overcome if you only grew up that way of learning, but it's just something to think about. Now, today I want to talk a little bit about the lost art of leisure too, which means that leisure used to be, and for the homemaker it was important because she would do a few things in the garden and she'd come in and sit down for a minute and look through one of her books or whatever. She'd get up and wash some dishes or prepare for the dinner, and she'd sit down for a few minutes, or she'd go for a walk outside for a few minutes. And the leisure was not considered laziness, but an important part of developing your character. Isn't that interesting? So when we first started homeschooling back in the early 80s, I insisted that my children go to a quiet place once a day, like between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock, and just be quiet. Now they could read a book, write a letter, just lay there and stare out the window. They didn't have to be useful or anything like that, but they could do something they chose to do that gave them a feeling of leisure. And I had been listening this week to different videos on YouTube about the lost art of leisure and what it meant to people in the past. And I'm so glad that people are researching this and bringing this forth. That was one of the things that Linda Lichter wrote about in her book, Simple Social Graces. She talked about these things that the Victorians left behind as evidence of their leisure time, the little samplers where they would write out the alphabet in needlework letters, and their scrapbooks, and they were autograph books too. Do you remember those? Really beautiful little bound books that people could write their love to you in. I mean, just friendship. The art of leisure, and I've been studying that more and more. And so the whole overarching thing in any of these talks that I'm giving you is to reduce anxiety and make us more aware of the character that we are responsible to develop. Some of it might be just something really small and quiet like patience. Patience, and especially in this current political climate, it's very important. I think that I benefited a lot by watching the videos of the royal family of Bhutan, because they have such a placid look on their faces, and they have a quietness to their demeanor. And this is what God tells Christian women to be, and men, Christian women and men. And I found a scripture on that here I want to read to you, and then we'll get on to your homemaking. Here it was. This is such a good thing to think about when the political climate hits you. And there was an Old Testament, I don't know if it was in Psalms or what, verse that says, when the enemy comes in like a flood, God will raise up a standard. I always wondered if that was when the enemy comes in like a flood, God will raise up a standard, or if it was when the enemy comes in like a flood, God will raise up a standard. Well, here's your standard. And so let's listen to what you can do when the enemy of peace. And now there's two kinds of peace. There's a peace that you get from doing what is right and good and having faith in God and trusting in Him. And the other kind is just like peace on earth type of thing. And we know there's always going to be chaos and wars and stuff around us, but it really is a lesson well learned if you can still have peace in your heart. It says, we urge you, brothers, to do this more and more, and to aspire to live quietly, and to mind your own business, and to work with your hands as we instructed you, so that you may walk properly before outsiders and be dependent on no one. What a thing to ponder. Now, if you're raising boys to be good husbands, good men, let's look at that. Walk properly before outsiders and be dependent on no one. I talked a lot about how men, the suffering of men, and that is from the beginning. From the moment they're born, the expectation is that they will be providers and that they will be builders of society and builders of life, and that they'll be responsible. And this never seems to leave them. A woman can go lay down or neglect her job, her housework, while she just goes into a rest for a while, but a man can never really let go of it because he has dependence and he doesn't want to be dependent. It used to be men did not want to be dependent on the state or on charity or anything like that. And if you ever watched that old movie Cinderella Man, I don't know if you saw this, it was during the Depression, and he was a boxer and he was out of work because he had injured his hand, and so he went to get some welfare, and he was so embarrassed and so ashamed. But when he made it big, he took a big old roll of cash, he got back in line, and he gave it all back. But that's just how the men used to feel. And so let's read it again. Whenever there is anything that is pressing upon you, and I loved Jane Austen's books. Stories are so good for us because they show us people in a dilemma and how they suffer through it and get from it, and also the different types of characters, the ones that panic and make themselves sick over it, and the ones that approach it in a different way, in a more philosophical, spiritual way. These stories are really good for us. And my little grandson was here. He's the one that, little grandson, goodness sakes, he's 25 years old. But, now that I'm vital, I can say that if I want to. And I just call him darling all the time. And he likes to listen to LibriVox books while he works. He has a computer job, so he can go anywhere he wants to and do these computer graphics for different companies. But he gets to listen to whatever he wants, and it's so pleasant because I'm in the house and I'm washing dishes, cooking, sweeping, doing laundry, doing my sewing, and I get to listen to he puts a speaker on it so I can listen to Dickens and Elizabeth Gaskell and other authors from LibriVox or other places where people are reading these books. And he said to me something that was so profound, and I don't know what I can make of it. But I said, this has just been so good for me. It just paces me, and I know where the story is going. I might have heard it before, but it's comforting and keeps panic away and everything. He said, stories are so good for us. And when I was little, those of you who read about me growing up on a homestead in Alaska, I had a very, very clever mother. She was from the prairies of Alberta, Canada. She grew up in a home that apparently had one of those dirt floors, but and they also lived in a house that was on the back of a wagon. And I had a picture of it somewhere years ago, and it was built up by my grandfather onto a wagon that was pulled by horses, and he and his wife and 5 children lived in that house. So that was the first, I believe, not the first motorhome, but because the gypsies always had their gypsy wagons, the same thing, same concept. And she told stories, and we had very little resources and she told stories when she wanted us to learn a lesson. She would tell us, she'd just make it up, and she would tell us how it would end up if you didn't do it this way. And she'd just make up a story, she'd make a character up and name them and see what happened to them, and see what happened to the ones that did what was right and the ones that didn't. And so stories are so good for us. And so we're talking about Jesus Christ and all the stories that he told to bring out the point to a reluctant audience, or to people who lacked understanding, to make it richer, to make it bring it closer to the heart and bring it closer to home. And we were just talking about this, there was another thing that we were talking about, and that was how singing and music helps. It's like a therapy, and how people used to sing, especially out here when you get in the western countries and they're out in the hills or they're out in the bush and they make up songs, and they could be songs that aren't really very encouraging. And they could be a song about an alligator, but they are relieving, and they give you some kind of feeling of therapy. And he brought up the fact that every Lord's Day, God has provided for us that singing that comes in the worship. So we have once a week therapy, listening to each other sing, and but the stories, and so we got to talking about all this, and I remembered three lost things. And let me see if I can find it. Jesus' parables. See, he told stories. Now, one of the lost things was a son that wanted his inheritance and wanted to leave home, and then he spent it all foolishly. And he wasn't called the prodigal son, actually, in the scripture. That was a little subtitle that's put by the printer of these Bibles. They put a little subtitle up there, the prodigal son. But he was called the lost son in this story that Jesus told. And he always used examples to create stories of things that were common, so everyone would understand what a lost son was, or what an older child would do when they demanded their inheritance and wanted to leave home. Everybody would know what that meant, what that was. And it's the same with the lost coin. And there was one other lost thing. What was it? Of the lost sheep. Everybody would know, because there were so many shepherds at the time. They could identify with losing a sheep and how much trouble you'd go to get that sheep back, because that was essential. That was your living. You wouldn't just let them lay there and remain lost. And so there was the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the lost son. And how do I know that it was the lost son? Because when he came back, the father had a big feast. He says, "This my son was lost, but now is found." So my little grandson and I discussed this at great length, and we didn't go deep into anything, but it's just amazing to discuss it back and forth, and the reassurance that you get from him is just amazing, especially in these times when you can't hardly, these phones are wonderful. I just love them because I get to find information on them and then also communicate with my descendants. I must say, I'm more excited about what they're doing than they are about what I'm doing. But isn't that the way it's supposed to be? Weren't we always more excited about our kids' accomplishments than they were about our growth and our accomplishments? They forget that we have a future and a hope too, and we're doing things too. And one day, I think they will reach an age where they will say, "I wonder what Grandpa and Grandma did, at this era." We don't waste time. Our life is not over yet. And so now, what am I talking about? Oh, peace and well-being. This is so important, and that's why I tell you, ladies at home, you want to get your kitchen cleaned up, and this bad news does not help you clean up your kitchen. And it's not that we don't have sympathy for anything that happens in a war, and we are in a cultural war We really are. And there's a war for our children's minds, too. And your child can be 40 or 50 and have his mind taken away with a vain philosophy. And that's why you need to stay alert, stay healthy, and really stay strong and have a purpose in life. And so I want to read this, Philippians 4, 8 to 9. We've read this before. It's been one of our favorite scriptures. And I have lots of lists and things to read to you. But I like to skip to one or two because you'll memorize them easier. And the things that you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things in daily life, and the God who is the source of peace and well-being will be with you. There was another one that said, if you do these things, you shall never fall. I'm trying to figure out which one that was. I'll have to try to find it for you later. But there's no reason for us to be you've got to watch the amount of anxiety and tension that enters into your body. You can feel it's called the stress. Cortisol is the stress hormone, and you can feel it. And if you have little children, they know, they can tell by touching your hand how tense you are and how relaxed you are, and that's why you have to kind of stay away from it and focus on your children. And so to reduce anxiety, these are just wonderful, wonderful scriptures, and I like that one in Philippians. Rejoice in the Lord always. Increase your rejoicing. That's why I think that you could have a little notebook and have a rejoicing notebook and just write things in it that make you happy as you go along. I admire these books you can get that are blank, because, and I especially like the ones without the lines, because you could put a drawing in it or something, but they discourage me because I'll do 1 or 2 pages, make a mess, have to tear it out or replace it, and I don't ever get the book really filled up. So what I decided to do, I don't know if any of you have seen these at the dollar store. This, by the way, is also from the dollar store. It's really nice. It looks like it's got a leather back. I don't know if you've seen these at the dollar store. They're just blank index cards. And they work for me because what I do is, knowing I'm going to mess up something, if I want to start a little notebook, I just make loose leaf pages and I clip in I just punch out these holes so I can tie something through that. And then if I mess up, I can throw it away. And then I just keep only the ones that I like here. And I write little instruction books or little booklets for my grandchildren or children. And so as we're going along here and we're talking about homemaking and housework, if you ever feel the anxiety, there's a good way to reduce it, is to start to clean everything up. Is there a drawer that you need to open up in the kitchen, and could it use some cleaning or some sorting? Of course, mine are like, I don't want to die yet, because they will hate me. I have to go through all that stuff. So whenever I get sick, I just pray the Lord will let me live long enough to get those drawers cleaned out and go through my sewing, get the buttons all sorted out. Years ago, I got this big idea for a tea party for sewing people that like to sew. And I had this big tea party, and I wanted some kind of confetti on the table, so I bought these fancy buttons that were in little categories, and one of them was roses, one of them was teapots and teacups, and one of them was just different kinds of things. And unfortunately, I took them out of the packages and I just threw them all over the table, and I thought it was so cute, but now I'd like to have them sorted again. And so I have a lot to do, and I'm finding that can be so settling to your mind. Go through a box of papers, go through a shelf of books, go through, now people are becoming more minimalist, which is nice because then you won't have so much to go through, but even if you don't have all that junk, you can always sweep, you can always iron your clothes, you can wash your clothes and iron them and hang them up. So to sustain yourself in a crisis, You really need to have these things that you do daily, which you might have to scroll back on the video and see what some of them are. They are take care of yourself, your appearance, very important. We've been taught, don't be vain. Don't bother with the mirror. Don't stand in front of the mirror and comb and rearrange your hair. They don't even give little girls time anymore to experiment, with their hair, different things that they can do with it. And we're shamed out of trying to look decent at all. I was looking at those clothes that the people of Bhutan wear and thinking how elegant and beautiful they are. And they must think out here in the West how poor we are because our clothes aren't very colorful. Their clothes are so colorful, and they're very proud of their weaving because they do the weaving of the cloth locally. And so then also make your list, and then what I like to do is check off things. So that's why I write little tiny things like brush my teeth, check it off. And it's really nice to see little check marks, even if I don't ever get to clean the fridge. At least I have a few check marks every day. And I have a new book. Let me see what it is here. Oh, we'll talk about the events of the news and the events of the day. And it occurred to me while I was listening to some of it. And of course, I get the text, what do you think of what happened or whatever. And I was thinking of this, and that is, you can get all patriotic, and it's good because the Old Testament teaches it. The Israelites had to be very patriotic. They could not show a bad side to themselves to other countries because other countries had already heard before there was email, before there were couriers. I think they heard that the Israelites had a great God. We have heard of your great God. Remember the Queen of Sheba when she went to see Solomon. I've heard of your great God. And so they had to be good ambassadors to the world. And so a patriot's civic duty as a citizen, and we are citizens of a spiritual kingdom, is to live the principles that of your king. And that's why I'm reading things like this. Be anxious about nothing, but in everything with prayer and supplication and thanksgiving. Let your requests be made known to God. Increase to get rid of the anxiety, increase your prayer, increase your thankfulness, and rejoice more. Increase all those things, and they counteract the anxiety. And that's a way, too, to guide a child, too, who's anxious. Let's do something positive, So you can be a real patriot. You can love your country. That's important. But if you continue to smoke and drink and vape and do drugs and even are addicted to pharmaceuticals and all these chemicals in your house and everything like that, it doesn't do any good. It does not really shine well for your country. And also continue to be, if people continue to be disloyal to one another and undermine the family and the home, undermine the wife and the woman at home, this is not patriotic. This really does not help, because you can have a really strong country that's really well off and financially everybody's well off, but if they have brokenness at home, if they have homes that are undermined and not functioning, the way that God wants it to be, that actually is what breaks down a nation. And remember the father of the lost son. He put up a banquet because he said, my son was lost and now is found. And how was he found? He came home. So home was considered and still considered really, really important. And I have a new book, and it's from Lamplighter. And I don't know what the publisher is, but it was from the Lamplighter catalog. And it was called Raising Modern Day Knight, a Modern Day Knight. And I liked it so much that it brought tears to my eyes, and I called one of my sons, we didn't have this when they were in homeschool or growing up, and I asked if we could have a do-over, and I cried, and I said, because I didn't get to teach, so we didn't get to discuss it, so I'm going to order another copy, and then we can sit across from each other and talk about it. So I want to read a little part of it. It's called Raising a Modern Day Knight, a father's role in guiding his son to authentic manhood. For the most part, you know, these women that say that you can't teach boys and you can't teach men, if you're a homeschool mother, you're responsible to do it. And if your man is out working, he's not going to be able to pay attention to every little thing. And so you're strong for this. This is what you're made of. So let's talk about this. We invest our sons with marketplace competence, but not moral conviction. We help our sons to become socially successful, but not spiritually significant. That's where this insecurity thing can be overcome. If they are busy trying to emulate the things in here, the character qualities in here, let me just read some of them, then they cannot, and they're trying to please God, they cannot ever feel insecure. They're secure in what their goals are, what they're doing. And let me read it here. And it was from, I've read this to you many times. I believe it's 2 Peter. Let me see if I can find it, kids. And here's a good one, and it's 2 Peter chapter 1. Therefore, preparing your minds for action, be sober-minded. Set your hope fully on the grace that will be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. As obedient children, do not be conformed to the passions of your former ignorance. I'm trying to figure out where this was. Peter. So people will try to make your son feel insecure because they're all up to date on what's going on in the world, and they're watching the latest videos, playing the latest video games. And your son, who's homeschooled, is innocent of all this, but they will try to make him feel insecure. You can only be secure in your family, in your home, and in Christ. And you can't be secure in the world, so just expect a feeling of insecurity anyway, but still, this is how to avoid insecurity. Make every effort to supplement your faith with virtue. Remember, this was an addition problem here. It was a mathematics problem. Supplement your faith with with virtue. I'm thinking about crime. Make every effort to add to your faith virtue. Virtue is the practice of goodness. It is strength. And to virtue add knowledge, and add to knowledge self-control, and to self-control steadfastness, and to steadfastness add godliness, and godliness with brotherly affection, and brotherly affection with love. Now here's the reward. For if these qualities are yours and are increasing, they keep you from being ineffective and unfruitful in the knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. For whoever lacks these qualities is so nearsighted that he is blind, having forgotten that he was cleansed from his former sins. Therefore, brothers, be all the more diligent to confirm your calling and election. For if you practice these qualities, you will never fall. Isn't that interesting? That's why you need these little cards. You can make up your own little character booklet on each one of these things. One can be on faith, and you can really explore that with your child. Another one can be on virtue and knowledge. And as you learn each thing, go through, like for instance, go through the Old and New Testament and find people of faith to use as an example. Go through the scriptures and find people who had what virtue was, strength was, and describe it. People, men and women, go through and put that in there. And you can even go through history for it. And I remember reading about one of the Napoleons. I never could get them straight. And he said, it was the one that was banished to the island, and he said, Jesus Christ has an army that continues on throughout the ages, because he continues even after his death, burial, and resurrection to gain more soldiers and converts. So he said, I have an army about me right now, but when I die, they will all be forgotten. I will be forgotten, and the army will disperse and be forgotten too. And he was so impressed because of the influence of Jesus Christ. So I wanted to read that in connection with raising modern day knight. We help our sons to be socially successful, but not spiritually significant. We give our son good things, but not the best things. Remember that little meme I had put on a recent video, and that was, Grandpa said, in my day, we lived very hard lives physically, but we were at peace spiritually. He says, now you live easy lives physically, but you're in turmoil spiritually. The only antidote to the futility of life, see, everybody gets discouraged, and we don't think the men get discouraged. They seem to be able to carry on. They're not as slain or devastated by things that happen. A man will get busy and do something. A woman will sit in her chair and cry and just want everything to change. The only antidote to the futility of life is a transcendent cause. Until a son discovers and commits himself to a cause that is truly heroic, timeless, and supremely meaningful, no amount of pleasure or success is ever going to satisfy his heart. King Solomon ultimately came to the same painful conclusion and left us a record in his timeless book of wisdom. Remember also your Creator in the days of your youth, before the hard days come and the years draw near when you will say, I have no delight in them. So, ladies, I just thought I would read that for you to encourage you, those of you who are concerned about your sons. And let me see what else I have here. I wanted to read a little bit more out of The Lost Art of Dress, but first I want to read about the textiles in this country called Bhutan. So here it is, or Bhutan, or however they pronounce it. I tried to find out the proper pronunciation. Here it is, and I will put a link on there for you so that you can go and read it yourself. On a Bhutan textile trail, discovering the fascinating weaves of the country. A symbol of Bhutan's culture, tradition, and skilled craftsmanship, exquisite Bhutanese textiles not only add an artistic appeal to decor, but also serve as a surefire conversation starters. Their threads, their weaves, you know, there's the warp and the weave. Does everybody know what that is? That's something you could write down in your little notebook. One goes one way and the other goes the other way. It's straight crisscross. Upon arrival at Paro International Airport, which is built in the traditional Bhutanese architectural style and looks more like a Buddhist temple than an airport, I am greeted with my guide with a unique, deliberate handshake, two hands cupped over one of mine, head lowered in a half a bow with a gentle smile. I don't mind the bowing. He is wearing a multicolored striped knee-length cloth tied at the waist with a cloth belt in the style of a bathrobe when I compliment him on his dapper attire. He says it is the national dress for the men in Bhutan, and all Bhutanese men are required to wear one during business hours. You know, there used to be required business clothes here in the West, too. I am very happy and proud to be wearing a go hand-woven by my mother, since it is a symbol of her love, dedication, patience, creativity, and hard work. Depending on the pattern, it can take her several days to weeks to make a finished piece. Now, he says he owns 5 handmade gos for the day-to-day wear. Gos made for festivities and special occasions are a lot more extravagant and expensive. I probably won't read any more, but you'll just be absolutely fascinated with the colors and things like that in here. But it reminds me of the cloaks of the Old Testament. I once did a research on clothing in the Bible, the New and Old Testament, and that is that the cloaks were so hard to make, and they were woven and so expensive that they were handed down from father to son, and that when someone was crowned king, they were given a cloak. And remember when the prodigal son came home, didn't he get a robe? It's the same thing, that these cloaks were awarded as prizes, and to show someone that they had value. Was it Samson that offered 30 pieces of clothing to someone who could guess the source of his strength or something like that? But clothing was so carefully made and on the loom, and so valued. And now, of course, they're chugging out clothes that you throw on, and they're stretchy, insignificant things that don't give you any inspiration at all. And I remember reading an old poet from back in the English days in the 1700s, and there was a poet that there were quotes that were recorded that he had written, and one was that clothing maketh the man. And I could never understand that, because when you grow up in a society where it's all quickly manufactured and it has no significance and no personality to it, it's hard to understand it. But if you grew up in an era where clothing was chosen to suit your station in life and your personality, it could really make a difference in how you felt about life. And I remember when we first got married, we girls, it was important for us to have new clothes, new wardrobe. We didn't just bring in any old thing, from our childhood, and we dressed up for everything. And so I want to read some more from The Lost Art of Dress. I did cover hats before, and it compared hats to shoes. And it talked about how the hats went on the wan because of the hairdos. And so here was some writing in 1954. A French fashion writer sniffed in 1954 that many young women go out bareheaded in Paris as in the country, and all they do in bad weather is to tie a handkerchief under their chins like so many peasant women. Sounds like us. But the new hairdos that came along were so stiff and high and teased that a hat couldn't, there was no hat that would work with them. So a woman didn't dare put a hat on them. The General Federation of Women's Clubs had to admit in 1956 that the hat is fighting a losing battle in this country, and that a great many smart and impeccably dressed women, particularly young ones, don't own a hat of any kind except the one they wear to church. Well, they don't even wear one to church, and even then you had to be careful because the hats could be distracting, or they could be too big, or you couldn't see past them, and so there was a problem there. I love the Fascinator. All it is a little headband in which you attach a silk or paper rose or something like that, or a bow or something like that on it. This is sad. It says, young women increasingly thought of hats as something only worn for special occasions. Between 1947 and 1967, more than half of America's hat makers went out of business. Isn't that sad? And so, see, somebody who created hats for Greta Garbo and Vivian Leigh retired in 1970 and announced, "Women are no longer chic. They have sold out to hairdressers." Yes, this is what I noticed, that the hairdressers were no longer really dressing hair, like coiling it and pinning it and making it into a pleasing style. They were cutting it and putting product on it and making it stiff and making it where you couldn't put a hat on it or it would ruin it, smash it, making it, and they're putting so much product on it. And I've known hairdressers that have quit the hairdressing business because of that, and they went into homeschooling, and they went to the homeschoolers and taught young homeschool girls how to dress long hair, how to keep it neat, how to keep it from breaking and splitting, how to keep it healthy, and you can wear hats with that one. It was hard to go back to hats because they were now offered in only one size. The bouffant hairdo meant a hat did not fit so much as perched, and manufacturers opted only to produce 22-inch hats. One-size-fits-all hats put women off by either squeezing or sloshing around. Not only the women in America still in hats were those who belonged to religious groups that worried about the appeal of women's hair. Old women who felt the need to cut loose after years of good behavior by not wearing hats. American women were left largely hatless after the 1960s. As a result, we have lost all the charms that the right hat can lend us as we age. I'm looking for a part here where she talked about how the hat, if it was the right shape or size, could change the way a woman looked. And how different colors could affect your complexion. And it was just all a whole, culture, because you'd have to sit at a dressing table. Someone would come and fit the hat on you, and you could look at it in the mirror and see what it did for you, and just very interesting. So we'll go into more of this at a later time. I hope that you got something out of this, and if you didn't, I hope you got a nice sleep. And I have a lot to do today, so I will be talking to you sooner than later, I hope. Thank you for all you do for me to encourage me, and I love your comments, and they give me ideas, and I hope to pursue more of it later. So go to my blog, where I will try to have pictures of what I have talked about and some of the books I have written, and maybe some links for you. So I'll talk to you later. Be sure and stay close to Christ. Bye.